That's just Bob, our human janitor, aliens laughed, until every ancient crown in the vault chose him. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The Galactic Council headquarters was perhaps the most magnificent structure in the known universe, a testament to the unified achievements of 17 advanced civilizations. And there, amid gleaming quantum steel and crystalline architecture that defied conventional physics, Bob Turner quietly pushed his mop. Sector 12 complete. Moving to 13, Bob muttered into his wrist communicator, his voice flat with routine. The device translated his words into standard galactic, forwarding the update to his supervisor, an 8-limbed Tricarian named Supervisor Vex. At 53 Earth years, Bob was neither young nor particularly old. His salt and pepper hair was trimmed with military precision, a habit from his 20 years in the United Earth Space Force before an injury had forced his retirement. Now, 7 years into his position as the only human janitor at the Galactic Council headquarters, he had perfected the art of invisibility. The late shift suited him. Fewer aliens to stare, fewer awkward interactions. Most species found humans unsettling. The way they sweat, their peculiar emotional outbursts, their inexplicable dedication to tasks others considered beneath them. But Bob didn't mind. The solitude gave him time to think, and the job provided enough credits to support his modest life on Station Epsilon, where a small human enclave had formed. Bob guided his cleaning cart towards Sector 13, the Historical Archives wing. This section of the Council building housed millennia of galactic history, including the famed Vault of Crowns. The vault contained royal artifacts from dozens of civilizations, many extinct, collected, and preserved by the Council as a reminder of shared heritage. As Bob approached the massive transparency doors of the archives wing, he spotted a group of dignitaries exiting. He immediately slowed his pace, following protocol to remain unobtrusive during official business. The group consisted of 7 aliens of different species, all wearing the distinctive purple and gold sashes of the High Council's Cultural Preservation Committee. "The preparations for tomorrow's millennial exhibition are nearly complete," said Ambassador Cree, a tall, willowy Solarian whose skin glowed with bioluminescent patterns. "The ancient crowns will be displayed for the first public viewing in 500 years. "A momentous occasion," agreed Director Frell, a stocky brevet with iridescent scales that rippled with each movement. "The security protocols have been tripled. Nothing will go wrong this time." Bob slowed his cart further, keeping his eyes down. The last thing he needed was to draw attention and be asked to come back later. The night shift was short enough without delays. Too late. Ambassador Cree noticed him and paused, her luminous eyes narrowing slightly. "Ah, the human cleaning unit. What was its designation again?" Bob suppressed a sigh. Most species in the Galactic Council referred to service workers as units rather than individuals, regardless of species. Humans, being among the newest and least technologically advanced members of the galactic community, were often reduced further to their functions. "Bob Turner, Ambassador," he said respectfully, keeping his voice neutral. "Night shift maintenance for sectors 12 through 17. Director Frell made a dismissive gesture with 2 of his upper limbs. "That's just Bob, our human janitor," he said with the clicking laugh typical of brevics. "He's been cleaning these halls longer than most junior diplomats have been in service." The other committee members joined in with their species-specific sounds of amusement. A Zinteran diplomat leaned toward a reptilian Drex. "Humans," she whispered loud enough for Bob to hear. "Always so eager to perform menial labor. It's almost endearing, like watching a pet perform tricks." Bob had long ago mastered the art of keeping his face expressionless. 7 years of similar comments had worn away any sting they might have carried. He nodded respectfully and waited for them to continue their conversation. "Is it safe to allow the maintenance unit access to the archives tonight with the exhibition preparations?" asked a concerned Nerillian with crystalline appendages. Director Frell waved dismissively. "The human has necessary clearance, and the vault itself requires council genetic authorization. Besides, What would a human do with ancient crowns? They barely understand the significance of their own planet's history, let alone galactic heritage. More laughter followed, though Ambassador Kree seemed less amused. Of all the council races, Solarians had always treated humans with the most respect, perhaps recognizing something of themselves in Earth's younger civilization. "Carry on, Maintenance Turner," she said with a slight incline of her luminous head. "The exhibition setup teams have finished for the night. You may proceed with your duties." "Thank you, Ambassador," Bob replied, bowing his head slightly as they passed. He waited until the committee members had turned the corner before allowing his shoulders to relax. Politics, he thought wryly, were the same everywhere, whether on Earth or across the galaxy. Those with power rarely noticed those without, except when they needed something cleaned up. The archives wing was eerily quiet as Bob entered. The vaulted ceilings rose nearly 50 meters high, with data crystals and preservation cases lining the walls in glowing patterns. The Vault of Crowns was at the far end, a circular chamber with walls of impenetrable quantum steel and a single transparency door. Bob noticed immediately that something was different. The vault door stood slightly ajar, a security breach that sent alarm bells ringing in his mind. His military training kicked in as he cautiously approached, leaving his cleaning cart behind. "Security breach in the archives wing, Vault of Crowns," he whispered into his communicator, following protocol, requesting immediate response. His communicator crackled with static before Supervisor Vex's annoyed voice came through. "Turner, your communicator is malfunctioning again. All I'm receiving is static. Complete your sector and report to maintenance in the morning for a replacement." Bob frowned. His equipment frequently malfunctioned. Human technology integration with galactic systems was still imperfect, but the timing couldn't be worse. He hesitated, weighing his options. Protocol dictated that he should retreat and find the nearest security terminal, but that would take precious minutes. If someone was stealing the ancient artifacts meant for tomorrow's exhibition, they could be gone before help arrived. Decision made, Bob moved silently toward the vault door, years of military stealth training guiding his movements. As he neared the entrance, he heard no sounds from within, no whispers, no movement, nothing to indicate an intruder. Carefully, he peered through the gap in the door. The Vault of Crowns was a magnificent circular room with pedestals arranged in concentric circles. Each pedestal held a display case containing a crown, circlet, or similar headdress from throughout galactic history. The room should have been dim, with only security lighting active, but instead, a strange, pulsing glow emanated from the crowns themselves. Bob blinked, wondering if his eyes were playing tricks on him. Every crown in the vault seemed to be glowing with an inner light, pulsing in unison like a single heartbeat. The sight was both beautiful and unnerving. Against his better judgment, Bob slipped through the door into the vault. The moment he crossed the threshold, the pulsing light intensified, and he felt a strange sensation, like countless eyes had suddenly turned to look at him. "Hello," he called out, feeling foolish immediately afterward. If there were intruders, he'd just given away his position. But something told him he was alone in the vault, alone with dozens of ancient crowns that were behaving very strangely. As Bob moved further into the room, the glowing intensified. The nearest crown, a simple band of dark metal with 7 white crystal shards rising from it, began to vibrate on its stand. Then, incredibly, it rose into the air. Bob froze. Nothing in his training, military or janitorial, had prepared him for floating artifacts. The crown hovered at eye level, its glow pulsating more rapidly now, before it slowly moved toward him. Every instinct told Bob to run, but his feet remained rooted to the spot as the ancient crown drew nearer. When it was less than a meter away, it stopped. The pulsing light steadied into a constant glow, and Bob felt a strange sensation in his mind, like someone was leafing through his memories, examining his thoughts, weighing his character. Then, to his utter astonishment, the crown moved forward and settled gently on his head. The moment the metal touched his skin, Bob gasped as images flooded his mind. stars being born, civilizations rising and falling, beings unlike any he'd ever imagined living and dying across eons. He saw wars and peace treaties, coronations and funerals, all from the perspective of those who had worn this crown before him. "What the hell?" he whispered, reaching up to touch the crown now resting on his head. Before his fingers could make contact, another crown rose from its pedestal. This one a delicate circlet of what looked like living wood, with leaves that still seemed fresh despite being thousands of years old. It too flew toward Bob, stopping just before him, then settling atop the first crown. One by one, every crown in the vault rose from its resting place. Dozens of priceless artifacts, representing extinct and extant civilizations from across the galaxy, formed a line in the air. Like a cosmic coronation ceremony, each waited its turn to settle upon Bob's head, layering one atop another in apparent defiance of physics. "This isn't happening," Bob muttered, even as the weight on his head grew. Yet somehow, despite the physical impossibility of balancing dozens of crowns atop one another, they remained perfectly stable, as if they had merged into a single entity. The door to the vault suddenly hissed fully open. Bob turned, the tower of crowns somehow moving with him as a single unit, to find Ambassador Kree standing in the doorway. Her bioluminescent patterns were flashing rapidly, an indication of extreme shock among Solarians. "By the first light," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The prophecy of the final sovereign." Bob opened his mouth to explain that he'd just been investigating a security breach, that he hadn't touched anything, that this was all some bizarre malfunction, but before he could speak, every crown blazed with blinding light. The combined knowledge, history, and power of dozens of royal lineages flooded his consciousness at once. He dropped to his knees, overwhelmed by the influx of information. Galaxies' worth of history, culture, languages, and wisdom poured into his mind faster than he could process. Names, dates, wars, treaties, technological advancements, religious movements, philosophical revolutions. All of it streamed through his consciousness like a torrent. Through the haze of information overload, Bob was dimly aware of alarms blaring throughout the archive's wing. Ambassador Kree was speaking rapidly into her communicator, her luminous patterns still flashing with agitation. More figures appeared in the doorway, security personnel, other diplomats, and finally, the full Cultural Preservation Committee that Bob had passed earlier. Director Frel pushed his way to the front, his scales shifting from iridescent blue to a pale yellow of shock. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, then stopped short at the sight of Bob kneeling in the center of the vault, crowned with every ancient artifact in the collection. The human janitor, one of the committee members, gasped. "He's stolen the crowns." "No," Ambassador Kree said, her voice filled with awe. "The crowns have chosen him." Bob wanted to protest, to explain, but the knowledge flooding his mind was beginning to organize itself, patterns emerging from chaos. He began to understand what was happening and why it was impossible. The crowns were not merely decorative symbols of power. They were repositories of their wearers' knowledge and wisdom, preserved through technologies so advanced they appeared magical. They had been collected by the Galactic Council not just as historical artifacts, but as an insurance policy against catastrophe, a way to preserve the collective wisdom of countless civilizations. And they were meant to choose a worthy bearer in times of great need. "This can't be right," Director Frel insisted, his voice rising with agitation. "The prophecy speaks of a being of ancient lineage, not a human. Their species has barely mastered faster than light travel. They've been part of galactic society for less than a century." Ambassador Kree moved cautiously toward Bob, her expression a mixture of fear and reverence. "The crowns have never been wrong, Director. If they have chosen this human, there must be a reason." Bob finally found his voice, though it sounded strange to his ears, deeper, resonating with an authority he'd never possessed. "There is a threat coming," he said, the words flowing from him without conscious thought. "A darkness between the galaxies that has consumed countless civilizations before. The crowns have waited for one who could understand, one whose mind could withstand their combined knowledge. He rose to his feet, the impossible crown seeming weightless now. I don't understand why they chose me, he admitted, still sounding like himself for a moment. I'm just a janitor. No, Ambassador Kree said softly, kneeling before him. You were a soldier once, a protector. The crowns see deeper than titles or positions. They see potential, courage, and the capacity for sacrifice. The room had fallen silent. Even Director Frel seemed at a loss for words, his scales shifting through colors that indicated confusion and disbelief. Bob felt the knowledge within him continuing to organize and settle, like puzzle pieces finding their places. With it came understanding, not just of the threat approaching, but of why the crowns had remained dormant for so long. They had been waiting for a specific type of mind, one flexible enough to adapt to their vast knowledge, but structured enough to organize it. Human minds, it seemed, had evolved to be particularly suited for this purpose. The very qualities that made humans seem primitive to other galactic species, their adaptability, their pattern recognition, their ability to function with incomplete information, made them ideal vessels for the collective wisdom of dozens of ancient civilizations. The exhibition tomorrow, Bob said, the words coming from the crown's knowledge rather than his own. It would have been a disaster. The exposure to so many minds would have triggered the crowns prematurely, before the bearer was ready. Ambassador Kree looked troubled. The exhibition has been planned for years. The political implications of canceling it would be severe. The political implications of the coming threat will be far worse, Bob replied, images of destruction flashing behind his eyes. We need to prepare. The knowledge within these crowns can help us, but I need time to fully integrate it. Director Frel had recovered enough to reassert his authority. This is absurd. We cannot base galactic policy on the ramblings of a human janitor who has clearly tampered with priceless artifacts. Guards, detain him. Several security officers moved forward hesitantly, clearly unsure about how to proceed against a human wearing what appeared to be every crown in the sacred vault. Before they could reach him, the crowns blazed with light again. The security officers stopped in their tracks, their various sensory organs transfixed by the display. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Bob said, surprised by his own calm. The knowledge flowing through him now included detailed information about each species in the room, their strengths, weaknesses, cultural taboos, and respect triggers. These crowns have chosen their bearer according to laws that predate the Galactic Council itself. To interfere would violate the First Compact. The mention of the First Compact, the foundational agreement that had established the Galactic Council billions of years ago, caused visible reactions throughout the room. Even Director Frel's scales settled into a more subdued pattern. The human speaks the truth, Ambassador Kree said, rising to her feet. The final sovereign clause of the First Compact is clear. When the crowns choose, the Council must heed. Director Frel's upper limbs twitched with agitation. This is a mistake. The crowns must be malfunctioning. A human cannot be the final sovereign. Bob felt a surge of information regarding the Brevik species. Their resistance to human integration into galactic society was well documented, stemming from an ancient religious belief that predicted doom would come from a young, warlike species. That explained much of the Director's hostility. Director, Bob said gently, your ancestor, High Marshal Frel of the Third Brevik Expansion, wore the Sundering Crown during the Mist Wars. It now forms part of this collection. He gestured toward a crown of metallic scales near the top of the impossible construction on his head. Your family's wisdom is part of what flows through me now. Would you deny your own heritage? The Director's scales flashed with shock. The history of his ancestor's crown was not public knowledge. It had been a closely guarded Brevik secret for millennia. How could you possibly know that? He whispered. The crowns know, Bob replied simply. And now so do I. A murmur ran through the assembled diplomats and security personnel. Whatever was happening defied easy explanation, which meant that older, deeper protocols would take precedence. Ambassador Kree took charge of the situation. We must convene an emergency session of the High Council immediately. The final sovereign protocol has been activated for the first time in galactic history. She turned to Bob. Sovereign Turner, will you address the council? The title felt strange to Bob, who just hours ago had been pushing a mop through these same halls. Yet with the knowledge of the crowns flowing through him, he understood the gravity of what was happening and what needed to be done. I will, he said, straightening his shoulders in a way that would have been familiar to his old military commanders. But not as a sovereign, just as Bob, who happens to have been chosen for a task he didn't seek. As the gathered officials began to organize the unprecedented emergency session, Bob felt the weight of countless civilizations' hopes resting upon him alongside the physical weight of their crowns. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a small part of him, the part that was still just Bob Turner, human janitor, wondered what the hell he had gotten himself into. But the crowns knew. They had always known. And they had waited patiently for billions of years for someone exactly like him, not despite his humanity, but because of it. As he was escorted from the vault toward the council chambers, Bob caught sight of his reflection in a polished wall. The man looking back at him was still recognizably Bob Turner, but the tower of crowns merged together into something new. A single crown that shifted and changed, reflecting aspects of all its component parts while being something entirely unique. Just like humanity itself, he thought. A species that borrowed and adapted from everything around it, creating something new in the process. Perhaps that was why the crowns had chosen him after all. A thought from one of the ancient crown-bearers surfaced in his mind. The most qualified ruler is often the one who least desires to rule. Bob had never sought power. He had been content with his simple life, his routine, his invisibility. But sometimes destiny had other plans. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe had a sense of humor. That's just Bob, our human janitor, they had laughed. Bob wasn't laughing now, and neither were they. The emergency session of the High Council was convened in record time. Within an hour, representatives from all 17 member civilizations had assembled in the Grand Chamber, a vast, circular room with concentric rings of seating that rose like a massive amphitheater around a central platform. Bob stood on that platform, the merged crown still upon his head, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. The High Council members ranged from microscopic swarm intelligences to massive gas-based entities that required special containment fields. Despite their diversity, they all shared one thing at this moment: complete and utter shock at seeing a human janitor standing in the place normally reserved for the highest dignitaries in the galaxy. Esteemed members of the High Council, Ambassador Cree began, her voice magnified by the chamber's acoustics. I present to you a development of unprecedented significance. The ancient crowns housed in our vault have unanimously selected a bearer, activating the final sovereign protocol established in the first compact. Murmurs and the various species equivalents of whispers filled the chamber. The selected individual is human maintenance technician Robert Turner, she continued. In accordance with the first compact, the council is obligated to hear his words and consider his counsel with the highest priority. The council leader, an ancient Virillian whose crystalline body had witnessed over 3 centuries of galactic politics, leaned forward. Ambassador Cree, while I do not question your dedication to protocol, you must understand our skepticism. The final sovereign prophecy speaks of a being who will unite the wisdom of the ancients to lead us through the greatest darkness. Are we to believe that this human janitor is that being? Bob felt knowledge from the crowns surging forward, providing him with the perfect response. He raised his hand slightly, and to his surprise, the chamber fell silent. Council Leader This, he said, addressing the Virillian by name though they had never been introduced. Your skepticism is reasonable. I share it. 6 hours ago, I was cleaning quantum spills in Sector 12. I make no claim to greatness or destiny. He paused, feeling the crowns guiding his words. But I stand before you bearing the combined wisdom of 74 civilizations, 29 of which no longer exist except in these crowns. They have chosen me as their vessel not because of who I am, but because of what humanity is: adaptable, resilient, and uniquely capable of processing disparate information streams. Bob gestured to the crown upon his head, which shifted and changed as he spoke, reflecting the heritage of whichever civilization he referenced. The Loxian crown of thought contains the final warning of an empire that spanned 3 galaxies before they were consumed by what they called the void between. The celestial diadem of the myth preserves the quantum defense algorithms that allowed them to resist for 17 years longer than any other civilization in their sector. With each example, the relevant crown briefly dominated the merged structure on his head, creating gasps of recognition from various council members. "I don't ask you to accept me as your leader," Bob continued, his voice steady. "I ask only that you heed the warning these crowns have preserved through eons. A threat approaches that has consumed countless civilizations before us. A threat that can only be recognized and countered with the accumulated wisdom of those who faced it first." The council chamber erupted in voices, each representative demanding elaboration, evidence, or simply expressing disbelief. Bob stood calmly in the center of the storm, the knowledge of the crowns allowing him to track every conversation, every objection, every fear being voiced around him. Director Frel rose from his seat, his scales now a deep red of confrontation. "This is preposterous. We cannot reshape galactic policy based on superstition and artifact malfunctions. The human clearly activated some ancient security system when he trespassed in the vault. He should be detained, not elevated." "I did not trespass," Bob replied calmly. "I was performing my assigned duties with proper clearance. The vault door was already open when I arrived." "Convenient," Frel hissed. "And we have only your word for that." Ambassador Kree stepped forward. "We have more than his word, Director. The security logs confirm that the vault's quantum seal was deactivated from within at precisely 23:47 Galactic Standard Time, 14 minutes before maintenance technician Turner arrived in the sector. Someone or something inside the vault opened the door." This revelation caused another wave of murmurs throughout the chamber. Bob felt the crowns providing him with context, showing him the exact mechanisms by which the ancient artifacts had manipulated the security systems, preparing for his arrival. Council leader Thez raised a crystalline appendage for silence. "If what the human says is true, if this threat is real, we must have evidence. The council does not act on prophecy alone." Bob nodded. "The evidence exists within the crowns themselves, but it would take months to extract and present it conventionally." He hesitated, then added, "However, there is a faster way. The crown of Meldis allows for direct mind linking. I could share what I've seen with select representatives." The suggestion caused an uproar. Mind linking technology had been banned by the council for millennia due to the potential for mental damage and privacy violations. But the crown of Meldis predated those regulations, and its capabilities were specifically exempted in the first compact. "I volunteer," Ambassador Kree said immediately, stepping forward. Her species, the Solarians, were among the most mentally resilient in the galaxy. To everyone's surprise, Director Frel also moved forward. "I too will witness these supposed visions," he declared, his scales rippling with determination. "If this is deception, I will expose it." For other council members joined them, creating a diverse group representing different galactic regions and political factions. Bob felt the crown of Meldis, a simple circlet of what appeared to be white marble, become prominent in the merged structure on his head. "Please form a circle around me," he instructed, the crown's knowledge guiding his actions. When the 6 volunteers had complied, he closed his eyes and accessed the crown's power. Tendrils of soft white light extended from the crown, connecting to the foreheads or equivalent sensory organs of each volunteer. Bob felt their minds linked to his, their consciousness touching the vast repository of knowledge now contained within him. He focused on the threat, the void between, the devourer of worlds, the unlight. It had been called many things by many civilizations. He showed them the records of first contact, the futile defensive measures, the fall of mighty empires. He showed them the patterns, the warning signs, the subtle indications that had already begun appearing in their own time. After several intense minutes, the light tendrils retracted. The 6 council members staggered backward, their various physiologies showing signs of shock and distress. Ambassador Kree was the first to recover. Her bioluminescent patterns had dimmed to almost nothing, a sign of profound dread among Solarians. "It is true," she whispered, her voice carrying in the silent chamber. "The threat is real, and it is coming. The patterns match anomalies we've already detected in the outer reaches." Director Frell's scales had turned a pale white, the color of absolute terror in Breivik emotional displays. "The human speaks truth," he said, his voice trembling. "The crowns have chosen correctly. We face extinction without their knowledge." One by one, the other MindLink participants confirmed what they had seen. The evidence was irrefutable, transmitted directly from the historical records preserved in the crowns. Council leader, this crystalline form dimmed slightly, their equivalent of a concerned frown. "If what you have shown is accurate, we have little time to prepare. What would you have us do?" Sovereign Turner. Bob felt the weight of the title, the responsibility it represented. Part of him, the part that was still just Bob the janitor, wanted to run away, to return to his simple life of cleaning floors and avoiding politics. But the knowledge of the crowns showed him the consequences of inaction, the billions of lives that would be lost without proper preparation. "First," he said, standing straighter, "we must establish an early detection network based on the celestial diadem's quantum algorithms. Second, we need to adapt the defensive technologies preserved in the crown of the last Zeth. Third," he paused, knowing his next words would be controversial, "we need to reconsider humanity's role in galactic defense." This last statement caused immediate reaction. Humans were widely regarded as a primitive, volatile species, kept at arm's length from serious galactic matters. Their military capabilities were considered rudimentary compared to the more advanced council species. "Humans?" Director Frell questioned, his scales showing skepticism despite his recent conversion. "What could they possibly contribute to our defense?" Bob smiled slightly. "The same qualities that made me suitable for the crowns make humanity suitable for this fight. Adaptability, creativity, determination, and most importantly, a unique way of thinking that the void between hasn't encountered before." He gestured to the assembled council. "Your civilizations have followed logical, predictable patterns of development for millions of years. The void between understands these patterns. It's how it has consumed so many advanced civilizations before. But humans? We're unpredictable. We make intuitive leaps. We improvise." Bob felt the crowns supplying him with the perfect example. The Altarian Empire had technology 10,000 years more advanced than current human capabilities, yet they fell to the void in less than a standard year. "Do you know why?" He paused. "Because they followed the optimal response protocols perfectly. They were predictable. Ambassador Kree's bioluminescence had begun to return as understanding dawned. And humans are anything but predictable." "Exactly," Bob agreed. "The crowns have shown me that this threat can be defeated, but not through conventional means. We need the unexpected, the unorthodox. We need humanity's chaos as much as we need the Council's order." Council leader thus considered this for a long moment, their crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns of thought. Finally, they spoke. "The first compact is clear. When the crowns choose a final sovereign, the Council must heed their guidance. If they have chosen a human, this human, then we must trust in their ancient wisdom." The leader's facets turned directly toward Bob. "What would you have us do first, Sovereign Turner?" Bob took a deep breath, feeling the knowledge of the crowns flowing through him, organizing itself into a comprehensive plan of action. "First," he said with newfound authority, "we need to talk about the galactic border anomalies your scientists have been detecting near the Perseus Arm. They're not natural phenomena." As he began to outline the defense of all known civilization against an unimaginable threat, Bob reflected on how much had changed in a single night. This morning, he had been invisible, just Bob, the human janitor, beneath notice and beyond consideration. Now, Crowned with the wisdom of ages, he stood at the center of galactic policy, the bearer of ancient knowledge, the unexpected savior. And somewhere, in the back of his mind, he couldn't help but appreciate the cosmic irony. The aliens had laughed at the human janitor until every ancient crown in the vault had chosen him. No one was laughing now. The next 3 weeks transformed both Bob Turner and the Galactic Council in ways no one could have predicted. The janitor who had once been invisible now stood at the center of the greatest mobilization effort in the history of unified space. The void between doesn't attack conventionally, Bob explained to the assembled fleet commanders, the merged crown shifting subtly atop his head as he spoke. It doesn't use ships or weapons as we understand them. It unmakes reality at its edges, converting matter and energy into more of itself. The holographic display in the Council's Strategic Command Center showed the approaching anomaly, a region of space where stars simply ceased to exist, expanding outward at an accelerating rate. Currently, it was 6 months from reaching the outermost colonies of the Narration Confederation, one of the 17 Council species. Admiral Zen, the highest-ranking military officer of the Zinteran Protectorate, clicked her mandibles in frustration. How do we fight something that isn't even matter as we understand it? Bob gestured, and the holographic display changed, showing complex equations and diagrams. The crown of the last Zenth contains the only partially successful defense ever mounted against the void. They created a reality anchor, a device that reinforces the fundamental constants of our universe, preventing the void from unraveling them. And this worked? Asked General Thorne of the Brevik Defense Force, his scales now showing patterns of intense concentration. Partially, Bob admitted. It slowed the void's advance, gave the Zents time to evacuate billions that would otherwise have been lost. But ultimately, their anchor points failed. The crowns have shown me why and how we can improve the design. In the 3 weeks since the Emergency Council session, Bob had worked tirelessly with scientists, engineers, and military strategists from all 17 civilizations. His unique position, possessing both the vast knowledge of the crowns and a human perspective, allowed him to bridge conceptual gaps between different species' approaches to science and technology. The ancient crown civilizations had all approached the void as individual species. None had the benefit of 17 different evolutionary paths to problem-solving working in concert. Director Frell, once Bob's most vocal critic, had become one of his strongest supporters after experiencing the mind link. The director now stepped forward, addressing the assembled commanders. The Council has approved Sovereign Turner's defense plan with unanimous support. Resources from all member worlds have been redirected to construct the Reality Anchor Network. The first prototypes have already been successfully tested. Bob nodded in appreciation but quickly redirected the conversation. The anchors are only part of the solution. They buy us time, but they don't defeat the void. For that, we need something it hasn't encountered before, something unpredictable. He turned to a different section of the holographic display, where a fleet of unusual ships rotated slowly. This is where humanity comes in. The ships looked distinctly different from the elegant, mathematically perfect designs favored by most Council species. They were asymmetrical, with odd protrusions and seemingly random variations between vessels of the same class. What are we looking at? Admiral Zen asked, her compound eyes focusing on the strange designs. Chaos ships, Bob replied. Designed using a principle humans call controlled randomness. No two are exactly alike, even when serving the same function. Their behavior patterns will be fundamentally unpredictable, even to something that has devoured thousands of logically consistent civilizations. An uncomfortable murmur ran through the gathered commanders. Most Council species prized order, symmetry, and logical progression. The idea of intentionally introducing chaos into military strategy ran counter to billions of years of combined tactical doctrine. You're asking us to abandon proven military principles in favor of randomness? General Thorne's scales flickered with patterns indicating deep skepticism. Bob felt the crowns providing context, showing him how to bridge this conceptual gap. Not abandonment, enhancement. Your conventional forces will maintain the reality anchors, holding the defensive line. The Chaos Fleet will serve as our offensive capacity, probing the void for vulnerabilities. He gestured, and the holographic display showed a complex battle simulation. The Crown knowledge suggests that the void adapts by analyzing patterns and predicting responses. It's encountered thousands of species that follow optimal strategic progressions. But it's never encountered human unpredictability backed by the technological sophistication of the Council. Admiral Zen's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. A butterfly strategy, she said, using a Zentran military concept. Small, unpredictable actions that produce cascading effects. Exactly, Bob agreed, grateful for the Admiral's quick understanding. We don't need to destroy the void completely. We just need to disrupt its expansion pattern long enough to establish a permanent reality anchor network. The meeting continued for hours, with Bob using the Crown's knowledge to address concerns, answer technical questions, and gradually bring the military leadership on board with the unconventional strategy. By the end, even the most skeptical commanders had grudgingly accepted the necessity of the approach. As the strategic session concluded, Ambassador Kree approached Bob. Her bioluminescent patterns showed concern mixed with respect, an emotional combination Bob had learned to recognize over the past weeks. "The human delegation arrives tomorrow," she said quietly. "Are you prepared?" Bob touched the merged crown reflexively. It had become lighter over time, as if adapting to him, though the knowledge it contained had only grown more organized and accessible. "As prepared as I can be. It won't be easy explaining to my own species why they've suddenly become central to galactic defense." Kree's patterns shifted to something approximating sympathy. "They may resist the burden you're placing on them." "Probably," Bob agreed with a small smile. "We humans can be stubborn, but we also rise to challenges, especially impossible ones. It's one of our more useful traits." The ambassador studied him for a moment. "You've changed, Maintenance Turner." "Bob," he corrected gently. "And yes, I suppose I have. 3 weeks ago, I was worried about getting quantum spills cleaned up before my shift ended. Now I'm worried about saving the galaxy." He shrugged. "The scale has changed, but the principle is the same. Identify the problem, find the right tools, clean up the mess." Kree's bioluminescence flickered in the Solarian equivalent of laughter. "Perhaps that's why the Crowns chose you. The galaxy needed a janitor after all." The following day, the official Earth delegation arrived at the Galactic Council headquarters. The group consisted of military leaders, scientists, and government officials, all of whom had been hastily briefed about the unprecedented situation involving a former Earth Space Force soldier turned janitor who had somehow become the center of galactic politics. Bob waited in the grand reception hall, dressed not in his familiar maintenance uniform, but in formal attire provided by the Council. A midnight blue suit tailored to human proportions, but incorporating subtle elements from all 17 Council species. The merged crown remained on his head, shifting occasionally as different knowledge came to the fore. The Earth delegation entered, their expressions ranging from skepticism to awe as they took in the magnificent hall and its diverse alien occupants. At their head walked General Elena Wright, Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces and Bob's former superior officer. "General Wright," Bob greeted her, extending his hand in the human fashion rather than using any of the various alien greetings he now knew. The general stared at him, her eyes repeatedly darting to the strange, shifting crown on his head. "Turner," she said finally, accepting his handshake. "When they told me it was you, I didn't believe it. Thought it had to be another Robert Turner." "No, ma'am, just me," Bob replied with a small smile. "It's been a while. 7 years, 3 months, she said precisely, since you took your discharge and disappeared into civilian life." Her gaze hardened. "Now I find you've somehow become central to galactic politics and are committing Earth to a war against. What exactly?" Bob gestured toward the large conference room adjacent to the reception hall. "It's a long explanation, General. Perhaps we should sit down." For the next several hours, Bob presented the human delegation with everything he had learned from the Crowns. He showed them the evidence of the void between's approach, the devastation it had caused to previous civilizations, and the defense strategy he had developed with the Council. "Let me get this straight," General Wright said when he had finished. "You want Earth to lead the development of a fleet of intentionally random ships to attack a cosmic horror that eats reality, while the rest of the galaxy maintains a defensive line using technology we barely understand." "That's an accurate summary." "Yes," Bob nodded. "And you're qualified to make these decisions because a bunch of alien crowns decided to stack themselves on your head?" Her tone made clear her skepticism. Bob felt the crowns providing him with the perfect response. "I'm qualified because I understand both humanity and the Council. I can see how our chaotic approach to problem-solving complements their ordered one. And yes, because I carry the accumulated knowledge of 74 civilizations that have faced this threat before." He leaned forward. "Elena," he said, using her first name for the first time since they'd served together, "you know me. I was a good soldier who followed orders and did his job. I'm still that person, just with more knowledge and a bigger job to do." General Wright studied him for a long moment. The Bob Turner I knew was thorough, dependable, and remarkably calm under pressure. But he wasn't a strategic genius or a diplomat. "I'm still not," Bob admitted. "The strategic insights come from the Crowns. The diplomacy." He smiled slightly. "Well, it turns out being ignored as a janitor for 7 years teaches you a lot about how different species think when they don't know you're listening." This drew a small smile from the general. "Always were observant." She sighed heavily. "The situation you've described is beyond anything we've prepared for. Earth has been a minor player in galactic politics since first contact. We don't have the resources or technology to lead this kind of defense." "You have something more important," Bob countered. "You have humanity's unique perspective. The void between has consumed thousands of logical, ordered civilizations. It's never faced humanity's particular brand of creative chaos." Dr. Eliza Chun, Earth's leading xenophysicist, spoke up for the first time. "The asymmetric warfare principle," she said thoughtfully. "Using our apparent weakness as strength." "Exactly," Bob agreed. "Council technology paired with human unpredictability creates something the Void hasn't encountered before." General Wright still looked unconvinced. "And the Council has agreed to provide this technology? To a species they've historically kept at arm's length." "They've more than agreed," Ambassador Cree interjected, her bioluminescent patterns forming respectful configurations. "The Council has voted to elevate humanity to full member status, with all the technological and resource sharing that entails." This announcement sent a shock through the human delegation. Full membership was something Earth diplomats had been working toward for decades, with little progress. "Why now?" asked Secretary Rivera, Earth's diplomatic representative. "What's changed?" "Everything," Bob said simply, touching the crown on his head. "The Crowns chose a human as the final sovereign. According to the first compact, that makes humanity central to galactic survival." He stood, gesturing for the others to follow him to a large viewing window that overlooked the vast council complex. "But more practically, the council species have recognized a truth they've been avoiding. Their approach alone cannot defeat this threat. They need humanity's chaos to complement their order." The human delegation joined him at the window, looking out at the unprecedented activity below. Ships and representatives from all 17 civilizations moved with urgent purpose, preparing for the coming battle. "It's not charity," Bob continued. "It's necessity. Humanity brings something essential to this fight. In return, we gain access to technology that would have taken us centuries to develop independently." General Wright's expression had shifted from skepticism to calculation, the look of a military commander assessing a complex tactical situation. "Assuming we accept this role, how long do we have to prepare?" 6 months until first contact with Council space," Bob replied. 2 years at current expansion rates before Earth itself would be threatened." "Not much time," the general murmured. "More than most species got," Bob countered. "The Crowns have given us warning. Now we need to use it." The discussion continued late into the night, with the human delegation asking increasingly detailed questions about the threat, the defense plan, and humanity's specific role. Bob answered each query with the perfect blend of Crown knowledge and human perspective, gradually bringing his fellow humans on board with the unprecedented partnership. By the following morning, the delegation had reached a consensus. Earth would accept its new role in galactic defense, with conditions regarding technology sharing, military autonomy, and post-crisis guarantees. The Council, desperate for humanity's unique contribution, accepted these terms with minimal negotiation. The next 3 months were a blur of activity. Bob found himself at the center of the greatest cooperative effort in galactic history, a former janitor now coordinating the defense of all known intelligent life. The Reality Anchor Network was deployed along the predicted path of the Void's approach, with the first anchors positioned to protect the vulnerable Nerillian colonies. Meanwhile, Earth's shipyards, enhanced with Council technology, began producing the first vessels of the Chaos Fleet, ships designed with intentional asymmetry and programmed with semi-random response patterns that would make their actions unpredictable even to something that had consumed thousands of logically consistent civilizations. Bob split his time between the Strategic Command Center, where he helped coordinate the overall defense plan, and direct collaboration with human engineers and tacticians who were developing the Chaos Fleet. His unique position, part human, part repository of ancient knowledge, made him the perfect bridge between Earth's chaotic creativity and the Council's ordered efficiency. The simulations show a 68% effectiveness rate for the Anchor Network, reported Dr. Chun during one of the daily briefing sessions. That's a significant improvement over the Zent's original design, which achieved only 43% effectiveness. Good progress, Bob acknowledged, but still not enough for a permanent solution. The Void will eventually adapt and overcome a static defense. General Wright nodded grimly. That's where the Chaos Fleet comes in. Our first ships begin full tactical trials tomorrow. The randomization algorithms have been successfully integrated with the Council's advanced propulsion and weapons systems. How are the crews adapting? Bob asked. The Chaos ships were crewed by mixed teams, human commanders providing the unpredictable decision-making, supported by Council species technicians operating the advanced systems. Better than expected, the general replied with a hint of pride. Turns out humans and aliens work well together when they're facing extinction. The cultural exchange programs you suggested have helped bridge the communication gaps. Bob smiled slightly. This had been his idea, not from the Crown's, but from his own experience as a janitor. He had suggested that before aliens and humans could fight together, they needed to understand each other better. The resulting exchange programs had created unexpected bonds between species that had historically kept their distance from one another. The Council Defense Committee has approved the final deployment plan, Ambassador Cree announced, entering the briefing room. Her bioluminescent patterns showed excitement and apprehension in equal measure. The Anchor Network will be fully operational in 30 days. The Chaos Fleet will move into position 10 days after that. Bob nodded, feeling the weight of what was coming. Then we make first contact with the Void 40 days from now. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. In just over a month, they would face a threat that had consumed countless civilizations before them. Their plan was untested, their alliance unprecedented, their chances uncertain. We should consider evacuation contingencies, Secretary Rivera suggested, breaking the silence. If the defense fails, there's nowhere to evacuate to, Bob interrupted gently. The Crowns have shown me the Void's expansion pattern. Once it establishes a foothold in our galaxy, complete consumption is inevitable without intervention. We either stop it here, or we don't stop it at all. He touched the merged crown, which had become almost a part of him over the months. But we have advantages no previous civilization had. We have warning. We have the combined knowledge of those who came before. And most importantly, we have diversity, 17 different evolutionary approaches to problem-solving working in concert. Bob looked around the room at the mix of humans and aliens who had become his team, his colleagues, perhaps even his friends. The void between expects order, pattern, predictability. It's never faced a defense as chaotic and diverse as ours. General Wright's expression hardened into determination. Then let's make sure it's a memorable first experience. The final days of preparation passed in a flurry of activity. The Reality Anchor Network was completed ahead of schedule, its quantum reinforcement field already strengthening the fabric of space-time along the void's projected approach path. The Chaos Fleet, 300 ships of varying designs, each incorporating elements of unpredictability, moved into position, ready to launch humanity's first offensive against a cosmic horror. Bob found himself standing on the bridge of the flagship, the USS Unpredictable, as the final countdown began. Around him, a mixed crew of humans and council species worked with practiced efficiency, their former differences set aside in the face of existential threat. Anchor Network reports all units operational and at full power, reported a brevet communications officer, his scales showing the blue-green pattern of professional focus. Chaos Fleet confirms ready status, added Lieutenant Commander Reyes, the human tactical officer. All ships report green across the board. Bob nodded, feeling the Crown's knowledge merging with his own instincts as he studied the tactical display. The void between was visible now, a perfect absence, a region where stars simply ceased to exist, expanding outward with increasing speed. "It's beautiful, in a terrible way," murmured Ambassador Cree, who had joined them on the bridge as the Council's official representative. "The absolute nothing. The ultimate entropy," Bob agreed. "The end of everything, spreading outward." He turned to face the assembled bridge crew. But not today. He gave the order that had been months in preparation: activate the Anchor Network. All ships, execute Chaos Protocol Alpha. Across space, hundreds of reality anchors powered up simultaneously, their quantum reinforcement fields creating a barrier of strengthened space-time along the void's approach. At the same moment, the Chaos Fleet engaged their drives, each ship beginning a seemingly random approach pattern that had been designed to be fundamentally unpredictable. The void between encountered the Anchor Network and, for the first time in recorded history, hesitated. The rate of reality consumption slowed, then stopped entirely along the reinforced boundary. For a breathless moment, it seemed as though the defensive measure alone might be sufficient. Then, with a surge that sent sensor readings off the scale, the void began to adapt. Tendrils of nothingness probed the anchor field, searching for weaknesses, patterns, predictabilities it could exploit. The Anchor Network strained under the assault, holding but beginning to fluctuate as the void learned its operational parameters. Anchor Network stability at 92% and falling, reported the brevet officer, his scales shifting toward orange concern. Estimated failure in 17 minutes at current degradation rate. Bob nodded, having expected this. The anchors were never meant to be a permanent solution, just a holding action until the real counterattack could begin. All Chaos ships, initiate engagement sequence, he ordered. Remember your training. Be unpredictable. Be human. The Chaos Fleet surged forward, each vessel following a different approach vector, their movements forming no discernible pattern. They reached the boundary where reality met nothingness and began their attack, not with conventional weapons, but with specially designed reality reinforcers that injected ordered energy into the void's chaotic structure. For the first time in its existence, the void between faced an opponent it couldn't predict. The semi-random actions of the Chaos Fleet created cascading disruptions within its structure. Where it attempted to adapt to one ship's attack pattern, 3 more struck from unexpected vectors with different approaches. "It's working," Lieutenant Commander Reyes exclaimed, studying the sensor readings. The void's expansion has reversed by 0.3% along the engagement front. "Maintain attack pattern randomization," Bob instructed. "It will try to identify patterns in our response. Don't give it any." The battle continued for hours, with the Chaos Fleet darting in and out of engagement range, never establishing a predictable rhythm. The void between struggled to adapt, its consumption of reality slowing, then stopping, then gradually beginning to reverse as the reality anchors and chaos attacks reinforced each other's effects. Anchor network stability holding at 87%, reported the Breivik officer, his scales now showing cautious optimism. Void regression now at 2.7% along all fronts. A cheer went up from the human contingent on the bridge, quickly stifled as they remembered military discipline. Bob allowed himself a small smile. The plan was working. Humanity's chaotic approach combined with council technology was proving effective against a threat that had consumed countless civilizations before. But he knew better than to declare victory too soon. The Crown's knowledge warned him that the void between was ancient and adaptable. It would not be defeated easily. As if responding to his thoughts, the tactical display suddenly shifted. The void's formless mass began to change, developing structures and protrusions that seemed almost like ships. "What is that?" Ambassador Kree asked, her bioluminescence pulsing with alarm. "It's adapting," Bob replied grimly, "creating pseudomatter constructs based on our own ships. It's trying to mirror our chaos with its own." The void ships began to engage the Chaos Fleet, their movements mimicking the unpredictable patterns of the human-designed vessels. Several Chaos ships were lost in the initial engagement, consumed by the darkness as the void constructs made contact. "All ships, execute Chaos Protocol Omega," Bob ordered, activating a contingency plan he had developed based on the Crown's knowledge. Full randomization, no pattern retention. The Chaos Fleet responded immediately, abandoning even the loose tactical formations they had maintained. Each ship began operating completely independently, their movements and attack patterns generated by algorithms that incorporated true randomness drawn from quantum fluctuations, a level of chaos that couldn't be predicted even by their own commanders. The void ships struggled to respond, their mimicry now rendered ineffective by the absolute unpredictability of their opponents. The battle devolved into what appeared to be complete disorder, except that the Chaos Fleet was advancing while the Void was retreating. Void regression at 7.3% and accelerating, Lieutenant Commander Reyes reported, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "The anchor network is stabilizing, up to 94% integrity." Bob studied the tactical display, seeing the pattern behind the apparent chaos. The Crown knowledge was helping him perceive the larger strategic situation even as the individual ship movements remained unpredictable. "It's working, but it's not enough for a permanent solution," he said. "We need to establish anchor points within the void itself." "That's suicide," General Wright objected from her position at the Strategic Operations Station. "Any ship that penetrates that far would be consumed instantly." Bob touched the merged crown, accessing the knowledge it contained. "Not necessarily. The crown of the last myth contains records of a probe that survived for nearly 7 minutes within the void before being consumed. If we can deploy anchor buoys from multiple vectors simultaneously." "A distributed injection," Dr. Chun said, understanding immediately. "Creating multiple reinforcement points to prevent the void from concentrating its adaptation efforts." "Exactly," Bob nodded. "But it would require perfect timing and absolute unpredictability in the delivery vectors." General Wright studied the tactical display. "You're talking about a suicide run." "No," Bob corrected. "I'm talking about a carefully calculated risk with acceptable odds of success. The Crowns have shown me the mathematics. It can work." The general's eyes narrowed. "You're not suggesting—" "I am," Bob interrupted. "I'll take the US unpredictable and lead the deployment team myself. The Crown knowledge gives me the best chance of calculating the optimal deployment pattern in real time." A heated debate erupted on the bridge, with both human and alien officers objecting to the risk. Bob listened patiently to their concerns, then addressed them with the calm assurance that had become his hallmark. "The Crowns chose me for this moment," he said simply. "Everything since that night in the vault has led to this decision. I'm not asking anyone to follow me who doesn't volunteer, but this is our best chance to end the threat permanently. In the end, A mixed team of humans and council species volunteered to accompany him on the high-risk mission. 12 ships would attempt the coordinated deployment, carrying specially designed anchor buoys that would establish permanent reality reinforcement points within the void itself. As the mission ships made their final preparations, Ambassador Kree approached Bob privately. "The Council wishes me to convey their deepest respect," she said, her bioluminescence forming patterns he had come to recognize as formal gratitude. "Regardless of the outcome, your service will be remembered for as long as civilization endures." Bob smiled slightly. "Just doing my job, Ambassador. Identifying the problem, finding the right tools, cleaning up the mess." "You truly are remarkable," she replied, her patterns shifting to something more personal. "You've united species that have distrusted each other for millennia. You've elevated humanity from an afterthought to a central pillar of galactic society. And you've done it all without losing the humility that made the crowns choose you in the first place." "The humility of a janitor," Bob said with a small laugh. "Turns out it's a useful quality in galactic leadership too." The final briefing was short and to the point. The 12 mission ships would approach the void from different vectors, their courses determined by quantum randomization to prevent prediction. Upon reaching the designated penetration points, they would launch their anchor buoys and retreat immediately. "Success probability is 63%, Bob concluded. "Not perfect, but the highest we're likely to achieve." Any questions? There were none. The volunteers, a mix of the bravest and most skilled pilots from across 17 species, understood both the risks and the necessity of their mission. If they failed, the void would eventually adapt to the Chaos Fleet tactics and resume its consumption of reality. "Then let's finish this," Bob said, rising from the briefing table. "For every civilization that fell before us, and for every civilization that will come after." The mission launched within the hour. 12 ships, led by the UES Unbreakable, broke from the main battle line and accelerated toward the void between, each following a unique, unpredictable course. The void's pseudomatter constructs attempted to intercept them, but the Chaos Fleet intensified their attack, drawing the constructs away from the mission ships. Bob stood on the bridge of the Unbreakable, the merged crown pulsing with energy as it provided him with continuous tactical updates. Through its power, he could perceive the movements of all 12 mission ships simultaneously, adjusting their approach vectors in real time to maintain maximum unpredictability. "Approaching penetration point," announced Lieutenant Commander Reyes, her voice steady despite the tension. "Void boundary in 30 seconds. All mission ships, final approach," Bob ordered through the tactical network. "Randomize your final vectors. Deploy on my mark." The Unbreakable shuddered as it crossed the boundary between reality and nothingness. The view screen showed only perfect blackness ahead, not darkness, but the absolute absence of anything that could be perceived. Bob felt a strange pressure in his mind as the void attempted to analyze and predict him, just as it had done to countless beings before. But the crown's protection held firm, keeping his thoughts shielded from the cosmic horror's perception. "Deployment point in 10 seconds, Reyes reported, her voice now tight with the strain of maintaining composure while surrounded by literal nothingness. "Anchor buoys armed and ready. All ships, prepare for simultaneous deployment," Bob ordered, watching as the tactical display showed the other 11 mission ships reaching their designated points. "Deploy on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark." Across 12 different points within the void between, reality anchor buoys were launched simultaneously. Each contained a quantum reinforcement field generator based on the crown of the last Xintha's designs, but enhanced with the combined scientific knowledge of 17 council species. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Where each buoy activated, reality began to reassert itself. Stars reappearing, space-time restructuring, the fundamental constants of the universe pushing back against the nothingness. "Anchor buoys active and stable," Reyes reported, her voice rising with excitement. "Field strength at 127% of projected values. The reinforcement network is establishing." Between the 12 anchor points, lines of strengthened reality began to form, creating a web that pushed back against the void's consumption. The tactical display showed the regression accelerating, 15%, 23%, 37%, as the reinforcement network expanded outward from the buoys. "It's working," Ambassador Cree whispered, her bioluminescence pulsing with joy and disbelief. "The void is actually retreating." Bob nodded, watching as the ultimate cosmic threat was pushed back by the combined efforts of 17 species, led by a former janitor wearing the collected wisdom of 74 ancient civilizations. "All mission ships, begin withdrawal," he ordered. "Return to the fleet immediately." The unpredictable turned away from the shrinking void, its engines straining as it accelerated back toward normal space. 10 of the 11 other mission ships were doing the same, their crews celebrating the successful deployment. "Mission ship Defiance is not responding," reported the Brevet Communications Officer, his scales shifting to a concerned orange. "Their engines appear to have failed during withdrawal." Bob checked the tactical display. The Defiance was trapped at the boundary between reality and nothingness, the void already beginning to close around it as the reinforcement network pushed the majority of the cosmic horror away. Without hesitation, he gave the order, "Reverse course. We're going back for them." "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Reyes objected, "the probability of successful rescue is less than 17%. The risk is acceptable," Bob finished firmly. "We don't leave our people behind, regardless of species. Execute the order." The unpredictable swung around, accelerating back toward the stranded vessel. Bob felt the crowns providing him with optimal approach vectors, calculating the exact course that would give them the best chance of success. "Defiance in visual range," Reyes announced as the crippled ship appeared on the view screen, half engulfed in the retreating nothingness. "Their hull integrity is failing. Estimated survival time, 3 minutes. Establish tractor link," Bob ordered. "Full power to shields and structural integrity fields." The unpredictable shuddered as its tractor beam engaged, connecting with the failing ship. Warnings blared across the bridge as the void began to react to their presence, tendrils of nothingness probing their defenses. "Shields failing," reported the engineering officer. "The void is adapting to our defensive frequencies." Bob touched the merged crown, accessing its deepest knowledge. "Modulate shields using the celestial diadem's quantum algorithms. Random frequency shifts, no pattern." The shield harmonics changed, becoming as unpredictable as the Chaos Fleet itself. The void's probing tendrils recoiled, unable to adapt to the constantly shifting defense. "Tractor beam stable," Reyes reported. "Beginning withdrawal." Slowly, agonizingly, the unpredictable pulled the damaged Defiance away from the void's grasp. Both ships groaned under the strain, their structural integrity fields barely holding as the boundary between reality and nothingness fought to claim them. "We're clear," Reyes finally announced as both ships broke free of the void's influence. Returning to the fleet. A cheer erupted on the bridge, humans and aliens celebrating together as one. The tactical display showed the bigger picture, the void between continuing to retreat as the reality anchor network expanded. The threat that had consumed countless civilizations was being pushed back, contained, neutralized. "Final regression analysis," reported Dr. Chun from the science station. "The void has been reduced to 0.3% of its original size in our galaxy and is continuing to shrink. The anchor network is stable and self-sustaining. We've done it. We've actually done it." The celebration that followed spanned 17 worlds and hundreds of species. The Galactic Council declared a year-long festival of unity to commemorate the victory. Humans, once considered a primitive afterthought in galactic politics, were elevated to a position of honor among the Council races. And Bob Turner, once just a human janitor, found himself hailed as the savior of all known civilization. 6 months after the battle, Bob stood in the rebuilt Vault of Crowns. The ancient artifacts had been returned to their pedestals, though they no longer glowed or responded to his presence. Their purpose fulfilled, they had become ordinary artifacts once more, historically significant but no longer active. All except the merged crown, which still rested upon his head, though its shifting had slowed to occasional subtle changes. The knowledge it contained remained with him, a repository of galactic wisdom that the Council had unanimously agreed should remain in his care. "There you are," Ambassador Kree said, entering the vault. Her bioluminescence showed the patterns of friendly greeting he had come to know well. "The ceremony begins in 20 minutes. The entire Council is waiting to formally recognize humanity's new status." Bob nodded, taking a final look around the vault. "I'll be there shortly. Just wanted a moment of reflection where it all began." Kree moved to stand beside him, her luminous gaze studying the empty pedestals. "Do you miss it? Being just Bob, the human janitor?" He smiled slightly. "Sometimes. There was a simplicity to it. Identify the problem, find the right tools, clean up the mess." "That's essentially what you did on a galactic scale," she pointed out. "You identified the void, found the right tools in humanity's chaos and the Council's order, and cleaned up a very big mess." Bob laughed. "I suppose you're right. The best janitors do work themselves out of a job by keeping bigger messes from happening in the first place. And yet your work is just beginning," Kree said more seriously. "The Council has unanimously voted to create a new position, Sovereign Advisor. They want you to help guide the integration of humanity into the wider galactic community, to ensure that what we built during the crisis doesn't fade now that the danger has passed." Bob touched the crown thoughtfully. "The unified effort against the void showed what we can accomplish together. It would be a shame to lose that momentum. So you'll accept the position?" Kree asked, her patterns showing hopeful anticipation. "On one condition," Bob replied with a small smile. "I want to keep my old maintenance clearance. Sometimes the best way to understand what's really happening is to be in the places where no one thinks to look." Kree's bioluminescence flickered with amusement. "The Sovereign Advisor who still checks the maintenance tunnels and supply closets? The Council will think it most irregular." "Good," Bob said, his smile widening. "A little irregularity is exactly what the galaxy needs more of." As they walked together toward the ceremony that would formally mark humanity's new place in galactic civilization, Bob reflected on how much had changed since that night, when he'd pushed his cleaning cart toward the historical archives wing. The aliens had laughed then. "That's just Bob, our human janitor," dismissing him as inconsequential. Now those same species looked to him for guidance, having learned that sometimes the most valuable perspective comes from unexpected places. The crown on his head shifted slightly, as if in agreement. In the end, the wisdom of ages had chosen a simple janitor to save all of civilization, not despite his humble position, but because of the unique perspective it had given him. Bob Turner, human janitor and savior of the galaxy, straightened his shoulders and stepped forward into a future that was brighter than anyone could have imagined, a future he had helped clean up, one cosmic mess at a time. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.